Hey, and welcome back to a very overdue video. Today, I will be talking about this lens right here, and that was a terrible click, so let's just forget I tried to click. Now, this is a very overdue video. I want to talk about my experience. No, I would like to talk about my life with the Tamron 28-75 G2 because I've done a lot with it in the 2 and a bit years. I'm not exactly sure how long it's been that I've had this lens. I have done plenty of client shoots. I have done a couple of weddings with it. I've done some macro photography with it. I've taken it around the world and beaten and bashed. I've done at least a couple of landscape photography pictures and all that, experiences with it. I've done everything this lens could possibly do and more. So I wanted to share my thoughts because I have a feeling that you guys like this type of video from me. So today we'll be discussing the great, the good, the not so good, and the terrible. Now I do have some little notes here, but as you can see, it's just an old torn piece of paper because I don't really need too many notes because I do know this lens so well. Now let's just get on to the straight details. There is no real buttons except for this one custom button right here. I think I've got that set as a focus lock. To be honest, I barely use the button. I really don't. It is because it is all built into the lens. You use the controls with your body. It is just, set and forget pretty much when it comes to using this lens. Now there is a little USB port on the side just here that is designed for updating the lens, which we will get to in a very short moment, but let's begin with the great. Now the first thing I want to talk about in the great is the quality for the value for money. Currently this lens retails at this price just here. Now in that, what do you get? You get a lens that is made and designed and built in Japan. You get a ridiculously sharp focal range, all from 2.8 all the way through. And on top of that, you get some beautiful bokeh and some beautiful color rendition through this glass. All for at least half the price that the Sony lens comparatively offers. Now, would I go and buy the Sony lens? Probs not, because I don't want to waste the money. Sure, you get to say, oh, I've got a Sony lens, and people go, oh, you spent a lot of money on lenses, haven't you? And I'm like, yep, could have spent that money elsewhere. But guess what? I did spend that money elsewhere, and I bought this instead. And I'm none the worse off for it. Now, I did mention sharpness and quality, so I do want to go through a few of these pictures here. As you can see, zooming in, we do get from 100% all the way to 200% and back again. We have some excellent quality photographs. As you can see, the eyes here are beautifully in focus. We have some really lovely contrast between the foreground and the background. The color in this one in particular is spectacular, if I do say so myself. And if we look at this macro shot, this is probably my favorite macro shot I've ever taken on this lens. It is just ridiculous how close I was able to get with that lens to the subject and get such a sharp, clear, clean image. Lastly, I just want to talk about weight because this lens, when it came out, it was the lightest lens in its class. And as you can see, there is next to nothing in it. You do have a very short focus throw. And because of that, it would be very easy to balance on a gimbal if you are thinking, or you have got this lens on a gimbal matched with whatever body you're running this on. That was part of the reason I bought this lens, is because it has just that very slight zoom range compared to the first generation. Now, I never owned the first generation. I have used it in plenty of forms, and from using it and from researching it, that was probably why I didn't go and buy it, to be honest. It was fine, and it is, it's still fine, but this just built on everything that the first generation was. And for example, this is it here. This ain't moving. Now, if this was the first generation, after a while, it would start to move. But 2 years in, it's still as tight as anything. Next, we're gonna move on to the good. Now, as you can see on this lens, there is no real buttons. On here, you got your focus pull here, you have got your zoom, as I've shown you before. There is one button, this one physical button right here. To be honest, I don't even use it. I did set it when I first bought this lens, and that was probably the end of it. I couldn't tell you what this button does for the life of me, because everything is controlled in the body. You do have your aperture adjustment on the front, and everything else is just done in body. It's so easy to use it, and once it's on and once you've set it, you just sort of forget. You're not really fiddling with any, you know, dials or modes or buttons, and you might be someone who likes that, and props to you if you are. I got used to not having them, and honestly, I don't miss any buttons. Now, on the external features, there is this little USB port just here, and that is used for updating the lens, which is pretty easy. All you do is plug the lens into the computer and then it will update it, and from there you can control everything from what the zoom ring does to the aperture, or aperture. You can turn this to an aperture ring, the focus ring, it can be an aperture ring if you like. You can control everything. Again, don't really use it. I have updated this lens a couple of times and it's fine. Like, you use it definitely, but if you're just a normal shooter like I am, you probably won't use it as much as you think you're using it. You go, oh great, plug it in. It's cool, it's definitely cool, but you just don't really use it that much. Now, I did touch on the zoom ever so slightly, and I just want to finish on the fact that because it is such a small footprint, it is incredibly compact. So if you only need the one lens for the day, this is a perfect lens that you can take out all day and you won't really need or feel like you're missing anything, because it is so small. It does take up next to no space in your camera bag or your shoulder bag, whatever you're using for the day, but you still get a really lovely zoom range. Now, the not so good, and I had to really think about this, because I know when you do a review, you have to go from like the amazing to the this is not so great. But the one thing that I have mentioned it very, very slightly, is that there is no aperture ring on this lens. Now, as I said, you can change this focus ring to become an aperture ring, and you can do that through the Tamron lens utility software. And I think if you plug it in just here on the side, just there, then you can press this button here and it will switch between a focus ring and an aperture ring. I have tried it, and again, it's fine. It's not a real aperture ring, so it's never going to perform exactly like an aperture ring, but it is worth noting, if you do love using your aperture rings and adjusting things manually like that, this is not going to be the lens to do that for you. It can come close, but it won't be the one. Now, these next two things are actually things that I do think about when buying third-party lenses, and that is the fact that because you use a third-party lens on the Sony body, it does not allow you to shoot at the maximum shutter speed. Now, that from memory is 1/8000th of a second, but if you use a third-party lens, then you're only able to shoot 1/4000th of a second. Has this affected me in real life? No, it hasn't. There's definitely been times when I would have liked to have a faster shutter speed, just with animal photography and that type of thing, but if you are using something like this for sport, or any third-party lens for that matter for Sony, then you will be stuck with only being able to shoot up to 1/4000th of a second. That is something to keep in mind, and it is a tiny little hindrance, but for the ability to pay half the price for pretty much the same, if not better quality, it is something that I personally am happy to live with. Now, this next thing, this actually, it kind of annoys me, and it's a thing that annoys me kind of regularly, and that is the fact that all Tamron lenses, all of them, don't have the little bump that you get when you are looking for clicking it onto the body. So, you know, when you push the button and you unhook the lens and click the new one in, this has just got a little white mark here. Now, I don't know if that's, you know, strictly something that Tamron does, but I do know that Sigma have a button there, or just a little physical lump or bump there, so you know where it clicks into. Tamron doesn't do it, and it is something that if you're in the dark, like if I'm out shooting astrophotography and I want to swap lenses and I'm using a Tamron lens, I can't do that because I have to wiggle it around to find out where it is to click it in and secure it properly. So that's Tamron thing. It's not the 28-75 thing, but it is something to worth note, or something to put down, think about if you want to buy one of these lenses. You do get used to it, and you just get used to, you know, putting the light on. And in this instance, because it has got this little thing here, then you can just use the USB port to figure out where it is to click it on properly if you want to do something like that. But it's worth noting. It's worth noting. It's fine. It's fine. It just would be nice. A nice little thing. Now let's move on to the terrible. And this is an area where it's sort of a grey area, right? Because it is 2024. If you're watching this in 2024 or, you know, later, then it's a pretty universal statement that it is very hard to buy a terrible lens these days. Now you can get the occasional dud. Sure, it happens. It's happened to me personally, and you just exchange it and it's fine. But for the most part, you don't really get a bad lens. It's very hard unless you're buying a manual focus, little cheapo that you're just trying to experiment on. If you're buying a full frame or a crop sensor lens that is for a mirrorless camera, they're all going to be pretty good, right? I think we can agree on that. But I wanted to leave this one for you. What is it that you have found, if you have been using this lens, if you own it, if you've sent it back? What is it that you've found that you didn't like about it in particular? Because I would be quite curious. This has been my first and only copy, and it's been absolutely excellent. I have dropped it, and it wasn't a good day when it happened. It was a quite upsetting day, but it was fine, but it still works. So what has happened to you? Tell me, I'm curious. Let me know down below and we can discuss. It's not about, you know, what is the most negative part of having this lens that you've had. It's just what's been your experience overall. If you've loved it and it's been fine and you're maybe looking at getting one, which I would highly recommend doing if you would like to get it. It is a great lens to have, but I want to know your experience. Tell me, I'm keen to know. And that's it really. Come to the end of the video. I didn't want to take up too much of your time, so I wanted you to sort of get in, get the information you need, and then get out of here and do whatever it is that you were doing before that. So on that note, if you have enjoyed this video and you have enjoyed this quick little 2-year review of this lens, then do drop a like down below. And if you haven't already and you would like to subscribe to personally help me out and see more of this stuff and see what I get up to this year, then that'd be very much appreciated. And then we can get to know each other a little bit. All right, go back to whatever you were doing. Don't spend too much time on the internet. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.